Jesus asks this question of those who are following him. It is a rhetorical one because what he says afterwards is clear that he's asking the question to prompt discussion. It isn't a genuine Jesus asking this question. He says, "What did you go out to the desert to see when you all were traveling in massive hordes to go see John the Baptist, who's now in jail, awaiting the fate of almost every other prophet? But when John was in his heyday and wasn't arrested yet, why did you all go out to see him?" Jesus is asking that question, right? And he goes through, it says, he wasn't wearing fine clothing, all of those kinds of things. Those are elsewhere. You went out to the desert to see this guy. Why? Why did you risk the temperature and the uncomfortableness to go out and see this guy? And I think what Jesus is doing is he's reminding them of basic things. He's saying, let's look back at this beginning. And that's always a good thing to do, right? On a regular basis, really, for all of us, to revisit basic principles, right? Like foundational things. To go back and read the first paragraph of the Catechism every now and then, right? To read the book of Genesis, which we do every year at the Easter Vigil. We go back and read the first chapter, right, of the Bible and all that kind of. It's always good to go back and look at basic things. And that's what Jesus is doing, I think, in this. He's reminding them, let's step back for a second and ask the question, why in the world did you go to see John in the desert? And I think that he's getting them to recognize and remember a couple of things, right? First of all, he's reminding them that, look, we all know in our hearts that this world is not self-sufficient. It doesn't sustain itself, it doesn't create itself, and there's something else going on, right? There's this basic reality that we know it's not just palaces and fine dining and nice clothing. We go out to the desert because we know and we're searching for answers to basic questions. And Jesus is reminding them, remember that. You went to the desert to go seek and listen for more because you know there's more. There are deeper questions that you and I wrestle with. And Jesus is just reminding them of the presence of that. Sometimes it's just good to remember all of us have these questions and these longings and desires in our heart. We have this hunger for answers, right? We have hunger for answers, and we are all searching. I think Jesus is reminding his followers of that. You're all searching for the truth. Why did you go to the desert? Because you're looking for something. And it's always good to remember that and to step back, particularly when we get lulled into the comfort of the world or we start to think that other people have the answers. No, we're searching for questions and we know where the answers are. And we go there, right? Now, once we recognize that, once we say, you know what? This world doesn't have all the answers. I'm searching for them, and I will go to the places and to the people that I know are speaking the answers, the prophets, right? For example, like John, the greatest of all the prophets. Lots of other prophets were out in the desert speaking truths as well. Once we get back to the basics, though, once we get back to the basics of we're all searching, we're all looking for these basic truths, and we have these questions, and we have this hunger for answers, we have this hunger for love. There are two basic paths that we can follow, I think, from that. And we see both of them lived out around the life of John, who we hear mentioned. One response is Herod, who we hear about, of course, in the Gospels and in regards to John. And it tells us in the Gospels, it says, Herod loved to listen to John speak. He was wanting to hear John talk. Because John's the local circus clown. But he was popular, right? It was the TV show rolling through town, and everybody was talking about John, and a lot of people are going out. And Herod's like, yeah, I want to listen to this guy, and then even when John is in his presence, right? Herod's glad. Even when John is telling him, you're in adultery, John's giving him the straight truth right out of the fire hose. Herod's like, that's tough to hear, but gosh, this is really entertaining. I'm glad I got to see the circus clown, the local show, right? That's one approach to John, to the church, to Jesus, to the prophets, to all of this stuff. That's nice. That's nice. Make it into a card, whatever. You want to work it in, hang some stuff up at your house, and that kind of stuff. Or, even come here every now and then, right? Or do a little bit of praying, all those kinds of things. It's this sort of keeping it at a distance, and ultimately in keeping it at a distance, it's a rejecting of it. It's keeping it at a distance where it doesn't call me, or I keep it so far away that it's just a thing out there that I just, that's nice. I like that. I like hearing that. That's good. That's entertaining. That's nice, right? The other approach, of course, is acceptance that it's true, right? The acceptance that what John is out yelling about, preaching about, why he's hanging out in the desert, right, is actually true, and I allow it to penetrate and change me. Not keep it at a distance, not just think of it as the local circus clown, not just keeping it or saying, that's nice, and you want to work it into some movies, and I'll kind of think about it and keep it out there, and that's great, church, good, great. Or let it in and accept that what that clown in the desert is talking about is actually true. We are all called to repentance, and it is a summons to battle. Battle. There was an early group of Christian saints, basically. They're called the Desert Fathers, right? We always see, they went out and they said, the prophets lived in the desert, Jesus spent a lot of time in the desert, John spent his whole career basically in the desert. These early Christians in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century said, let's go live in the desert. You can read their sayings. It's some of the best and most profound sayings that we have as Catholics on prayer. And I want to read one of those to you, right? This is from one of the Desert Fathers. Prayer is warfare to the last breath. Prayer is warfare to the last breath. You are summoned to a showdown in the desert. And in the desert, the reason John's out there, the reason Elijah's out there, the reason the Desert Fathers are out there, the reason that Jesus is out there is because there's nowhere to hide. It's a showdown between good and evil. And we're summoned to that. And we're summoned to be people who allow the truth of Christ to penetrate ourselves so much and to believe that it's true and to recognize that I need to change and that I need to do that by prayer. Prayer is the way that I change. The way that God changes us through prayer and through the sacraments. But let's just focus on prayer for a minute, right? We're called to the desert of prayer, to silence. To silence. And if you don't have silence in your life on a daily basis, I'm going to say something kind of John the Baptist-y, you're in a lot of trouble. Your spiritual life is in grave danger if you are not regularly and on a daily basis heading into the desert of silence. We hate silence. We will do anything we can. I'm always like, this week I actually go on a retreat and it's going to be silent. And I'm always like, oh yeah, I can't wait to go on retreat till it gets close. And I'm like, oh my gosh, 5 days of silence. It's going to be awful. We will do anything we can basically to avoid the desert and to avoid the silence because we know that we're summoned there, and it's really hard. Prayer is hard. Following the life of Christ is hard. The battle of prayer, though, is real, and we're being summoned there. And that's what John is out there saying. Not that we all have to literally move to the desert. It's also a beautiful metaphor for prayer and for the spiritual life. We're summoned out there. Because the world around us doesn't have the answers. And so you and I are called, and that's what Advent is about. It's about focusing on silence, preparing our hearts, how is my prayer life? What am I doing? Am I spending time in silence, or am I on spiritual life support? and avoiding silence in every possible way. Am I a person that thinks that, well, I try to pray, but I'm not any good at it? No, that's every human person. Prayer is hard. You're not doing it wrong. You're being attacked by a very powerful enemy who wants to keep you from silence and from prayer. What did you go out to the desert to see? Is what Jesus asks in the gospel today. And I think he's asking us the same thing. What are you going out to the desert to see? And why are you staying? Or are you fleeing back home to the comfort of the world? We're invited to live in the desert of prayer. It is warfare to the last breath. It is a showdown between you and the evil one who seeks to derail your spiritual life. Will you go? Will you go into the desert of prayer? Will you go into the desert of silence, knowing that every saint has passed through the exact same land, and that it's hard, and that you're not doing it wrong when you get distracted or you have challenges? We're still called to persevere. We're called to live in the desert of silence. We're called to go and listen to the prophets and to Christ himself as they speak to us about the truth of things. Or we can treat the good news of the gospel as some sort of comforting thing that we throw on a Christmas card and keep at arm's length and never allow it to change us.